I used to think the worst thing about being a financial compliance officer was the endless spreadsheets. Turns out, the worst thing is having the skills to track every dollar your wife spends on her affair. My name is Felix Rourde, and I'm 40 years old with a talent for finding financial irregularities. It's what I do for a living. Follow the money, spot the patterns, catch the lies. I just never thought I'd be using those skills on my own marriage. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Brielle and I had what everyone called the perfect life. She was a luxury event planner, all glamour and connections, while I was the numbers guy who made sure everything added up. We lived in a high-rise condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, drove matching BMWs, and threw dinner parties that made the social pages. We have everything, I used to joke to friends, except a wine fridge that doesn't hum like a distressed moose. But lately things weren't adding up. Literally. It started with the cash withdrawals. 500 here, 300 there. Always from ATMs I didn't recognize. In parts of town, Brielle claimed she never visited. When I asked about them, she'd wave her manicured hand dismissively. Event planning requires cash, Felix. You know that. Except I knew her business inside and out. I'd set up her accounting system myself. Everything went through credit cards for the paper trail. Cash was for tips, maybe, but not $800 a week. Then came the solo retreats. Brielle had always been social, but suddenly she needed space to find herself. Weekend trips to spas I couldn't find online. Yoga retreats with no websites. Meditation centers that didn't answer their phones. "You're becoming paranoid," she said one morning, applying lipstick in our bathroom mirror. "It's not attractive." I watched her in the reflection, noting how she avoided eye contact. 20 years in compliance had taught me to read tells. Brielle was lying, and she wasn't even good at it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I was working late, reviewing quarterly reports, when my phone buzzed with a text from Mimi Castellano, Brielle's best friend and the biggest gossip in our social circle. "Saw B at Meridian last night. She looked happy, very happy. Thought you should know." Meridian was a boutique hotel downtown, expensive, discreet, the kind of place where married people went when they weren't with their spouses. I knew because I'd helped prosecute an embezzlement case there 2 years ago. I called Brielle. Voicemail. I called again an hour later. Still voicemail. At midnight, she walked through our front door like nothing had happened, carrying a shopping bag from a store that closed at 9. "Working late again?" she asked, not meeting my eyes. "Where were you?" "Dinner with clients. I told you this morning." "Which clients?" "The Morrison wedding. You don't know them." I pulled out my phone and showed her Mimi's text. Brielle's face went through a series of micro-expressions, surprise, calculation, then practiced innocence. "Mimi's drunk half the time and blind the other half. I was at Rossini's with the Morrisons. You can call them if you want." But she said it like she knew I wouldn't. Like she was counting on my politeness, my trust, my willingness to believe her over my own instincts. That night, I lay awake listening to her breathe, thinking about patterns and anomalies and the way guilty people always offered more details than you asked for. The Morrison wedding, specific enough to sound real, vague enough to be untraceable. The next morning, I did what I should have done weeks ago. I started following the money. Brielle's personal account showed regular transfers to a credit card I didn't recognize. The hotel charges, the cash advances, the payments to places like Discretion Boutique and Private Moments Spa. She'd been careful, but not careful enough. She'd forgotten she was married to someone who found hidden money for a living. The burner phone was tucked behind her jewelry box, wrapped in a silk scarf like a secret she was saving for later. I found it while she was at her Thursday book club, another fiction since she hadn't read a book in 5 years. The text messages were explicit, passionate, and devastating. They were also time-stamped during our anniversary dinner last month. Teddy V was Theodore Voss, a real estate developer I'd met at charity galas. Smug, flashy, the kind of man who wore cologne like armor and talked about his vision for the city. He was married to a quiet woman named Patricia, who always looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Now I knew why. The messages painted a picture of secret meetings, stolen afternoons, and plans for a future that didn't include me. They talked about when the divorce is final and splitting his assets. They discussed my habits, my schedule, my vulnerabilities like I was a problem to be solved rather than a husband to be respected. The worst part? They were laughing at me. Actually laughing. "Felix thinks spreadsheets are foreplay," Brielle had texted. "He probably wouldn't notice if I moved out completely." I sat in our bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of my wife's betrayal, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not heartbreak. That would come later. This was something sharper, more focused. This was the feeling I got when I found a discrepancy in the books and knew exactly how to trace it back to its source. When Brielle came home that night, I was waiting in the living room with a glass of wine and a manila folder. "We need to talk," I said. She glanced at the folder, and I saw fear flicker across her face before she composed herself. "About what?" I opened the folder and spread out the bank statements, the hotel receipts, the phone records. I watched her face as she realized how thoroughly I'd documented her deception. "About your extracurricular activities." For a moment she was silent. Then she laughed, actually laughed, like this was all some amusing misunderstanding. "Felix, you're being ridiculous. This is exactly why I need space. You're suffocating me with your paranoia." "Suffocating you?" "I'm trying to understand why my wife is spending our money on hotel rooms with Theodore Voss." "You went through my things? My private accounts?" She stood up, suddenly furious. "That's a violation of trust, Felix. That's what?" I stood too, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had the high ground. "That's what, Brielle? Worse than cheating. Worse than planning to divorce me while you're still sleeping in my bed." She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried a different tactic. Her voice went soft, vulnerable. "Felix, I can explain. It's not what you think. Teddy and I were just friends. He's helping me with some business opportunities." "Business opportunities that require lingerie?" I pulled out a credit card statement and pointed to a charge from Discretion Boutique, $240 for intimate apparel. "That wasn't for him," she said quickly. "That was for you, for us. I was planning a surprise." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop. I've seen the texts, Brielle. I know about the hotel rooms. I know about your plans to take half of everything in the divorce. I know you think I'm too stupid to notice." Her mask finally slipped. The vulnerability disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Fine," she said. "You want the truth? Here's the truth. You're boring, Felix. You're predictable and boring, and you make me feel like I'm fading inside. Teddy makes me feel alive. Teddy's married. Not for long, neither am I." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere I can breathe. Don't wait up." The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with the evidence of my ruined marriage and a new understanding of exactly who I'd been living with for the past 8 years. I poured myself another glass of wine and started planning. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Maris Ventor's clinic. Maris was Brielle's younger sister and a clinical therapist who specialized in family dynamics. She was also the only person in Brielle's family who'd ever seemed to genuinely like me. "Felix?" She looked surprised when I appeared in her waiting room. "Don't you have an appointment?" "I need to talk to someone who understands how families work," I said. "And I need them to be on my side for once." Maris was everything Brielle wasn't. Understated, intelligent, genuinely warm. Where Brielle performed emotions, Maris actually felt them. She listened without interrupting as I laid out everything I'd discovered. "I'm not surprised," she said when I finished. "I'm disappointed but not surprised." "You knew?" "I suspected. Brielle's been different lately. More secretive, more performative. She's always been dramatic, but this was something else." Maris leaned back in her chair. "Can I tell you something about my sister?" I nodded. Brielle has never been happy with what she has. Even as kids, she always wanted someone else's toy, someone else's life. She spent her whole adult life trying to trade up. And I was just another trade? You were stability, security, a nice life while she figured out what she really wanted. Maris's voice was gentle but honest. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I told her about the evidence I'd gathered, the financial records, the plans I was already forming. Maris listened with the focused attention of someone who understood human behavior at a professional level. "Be careful," she said finally. "Brielle doesn't like to lose. If she feels cornered, she'll fight dirty." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Brielle's name appeared on the screen. "Felix? I've been thinking about last night. Maybe we should try counseling." "Counseling? I know I made some mistakes, but we can work through this. We have too much history to throw it all away." I looked at Maris, who was shaking her head slightly. "Where are you?" I asked. "At Teddy's. But that's over now. I ended it this morning. I want to come home and fix this." "You ended it?" "Completely. I told him I was confused, but I know what I want now. I want my marriage." I almost believed her. The desperation in her voice sounded real. But then I remembered the texts, the laughter, the casual cruelty of their plans. "Come home," I said. "We'll talk." I hung up and looked at Maris. "She's lying," Maris said simply. "She's buying time while she figures out her next move." "How do you know?" "Because I know my sister. She doesn't end things. She just gets better at hiding them." That afternoon, I met with Nash Kowalski, my oldest friend and a former police detective who now ran a private security firm. Nash was the kind of guy who could make problems disappear legally and quietly. "You want to divorce her," Nash said after I explained the situation. "Take half her business. Move on with your life. It's not about the money." "It's always about the money, Felix. Trust me on this. It's about the humiliation, the way they talked about me, the way she made me feel like an idiot for trusting her." Nash studied me for a long moment. "You want revenge." "I want justice." "Same thing, different packaging." He leaned forward. "What did you have in mind?" I pulled out a notebook filled with ideas I'd been developing. Nash read through them, occasionally nodding or making small adjustments. "This could work," he said finally, "but it requires perfect timing and a lot of patience. You sure you want to go this route?" She made me look like a fool. "I want to return the favor." "All right. But we do this my way, clean, legal, and untraceable. You're not going to prison for someone who doesn't deserve your freedom." That evening, Brielle came home with flowers and takeout from my favorite restaurant. She'd changed into the dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, and her makeup was perfect. "I'm sorry," she said, setting the food on our dining room table. "I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust, but I want to fix this." I sat down across from her, studying her performance. She was good, the right amount of remorse, the perfect balance of vulnerability and hope. "What about Teddy?" "I told you that's over. It was a mistake, a midlife crisis or something. I wasn't thinking clearly." "And the divorce plans?" She blinked, surprised that I knew about those. "We never seriously discussed divorce. We talked about hypotheticals, what-if scenarios. It didn't mean anything." "Hypotheticals about splitting my assets?" "Felix, you're taking things out of context. Teddy was just being protective, talking about worst-case scenarios." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop lying to me." Her face hardened slightly, then softened again as she remembered she was supposed to be apologetic. I'm not lying. I'm trying to save our marriage. By continuing to lie? I'm telling you the truth. The truth is that you're still seeing him. The truth is that you're only here because something went wrong with your plan. The truth is that you think I'm stupid enough to believe this performance. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw her recalculating. Fine, she said. Maybe I wasn't completely honest about everything, but I am serious about fixing this. Prove it. How? Cut all contact with Teddy. Give me access to all your accounts. Go to counseling. Rebuild the trust you destroyed. She was quiet for a long time, and I could see her weighing her options. I need some time to think, she said finally. How much time? A few days? Maybe a week? Where will you stay? With Mimi. Just until I figure out how to move forward. She packed a bag and left that night. I watched from our window as she got into a car that wasn't hers, a black sedan with tinted windows that screamed, Teddy's driver. I called Nash. She took the bait, I said. Good. Phase 2 starts tomorrow. The next morning, I walked into my office at Meridian Financial and asked my assistant, Rita Castellanos, to clear my calendar. Everything okay, Mr. Rourde? Rita was 29, sharp as a razor and completely trustworthy. She'd been my assistant for 3 years and had never once leaked confidential information or failed to follow through on a request. I need to restructure some personal assets, I said, and I need it done quietly. Legal separation? Eventually. For now, I just need to protect myself. Rita nodded without judgment. What do you need? Over the next 2 hours, we systematically separated my finances from Brielle's. Joint accounts were closed, and the funds transferred to new accounts in my name only. Credit cards were canceled. The lease on our condo was transferred to my name alone, with Brielle's signature forged, using a power of attorney she'd signed years ago for a different purpose, but had never revoked. This is all legal? Rita asked as she processed the paperwork. Completely. I'm not taking anything that isn't mine. I'm just making sure she can't take anything that is. By lunch, Brielle Torin was financially cut off from the life she'd been living. Her credit cards would be declined, her access to our joint accounts would be denied, her name would be removed from our lease, our insurance policies, and our investment accounts. She wouldn't know until she tried to use them. That afternoon, I drove to Brielle's office, a converted warehouse in the arts district where she planned events for the city's elite. Her assistant, a young woman named Jessica, looked up nervously when I walked in. Mr. Rourde? Mrs. Rourde isn't here today. I know. I'm here about her client accounts. I handed Jessica a folder containing letters I'd spent the morning drafting. These are notifications that Brielle will be taking an indefinite sabbatical for personal reasons. All current clients should be referred to the vendors listed in the second page. Jessica flipped through the letters, confused. I don't understand. She didn't mention a sabbatical. It's a family emergency, I said. She asked me to handle the business side while she deals with the personal situation. It wasn't technically a lie. Brielle's affair was definitely a family emergency, and I was certainly handling the business side. Jessica agreed to send the letters, and I left knowing that Brielle's carefully cultivated client base would be scattered to her competitors within days. That evening, Nash called with an update. Teddy's having dinner at Ristorante Bella with his wife and another couple, he said. Table by the window, very public, very visible. Perfect. Is Carlos driving? Carlos was Teddy's driver, a young man who'd been surprisingly willing to share information about his employer's schedule in exchange for cash payments that were completely legal and absolutely effective. Carlos says Teddy's been bragging about his new project to anyone who'll listen. Apparently, he's planning to leave his wife and start fresh with someone more exciting. How romantic. Gets better? Patricia Voss has hired a private investigator. She knows about the affair. This was an unexpected development, but not an unwelcome one. How do you know? Because the PI called me for a reference check. Turns out we know each other from the old days. What did you tell him? That you're a stand-up guy who deserves better, and that any evidence he finds should probably be shared with both betrayed spouses. I smiled. Nash had always been good at making connections work in his favor. What's our timeline? Teddy's hosting a charity gala tomorrow night at his mansion. Big crowd, lots of cameras, perfect opportunity for a public demonstration. What kind of demonstration? The kind that makes him wish he'd kept his mouth shut about spreadsheets and foreplay. The next evening, I dressed in my best suit and drove to Teddy's mansion in the hills. The charity gala was in full swing, hundreds of guests, live music, and enough alcohol to make everyone forget what they'd seen by morning. Except they wouldn't forget, because Nash had made sure there would be plenty of cameras. I found Teddy holding court near the pool, regaling a group of admirers with stories about his latest development project. He was wearing a white dinner jacket that probably cost more than most people's cars, and his smile was so bright it could have powered the string lights overhead. "Felix," he called out when he saw me. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, shaking his hand. "Brielle sends her regrets. She's dealing with some personal business." Something flickered in his eyes. Concern, maybe, or calculation. "Nothing serious, I hope?" "Oh, very serious. Life-changing, you might say." I excused myself and found Nash near the house, setting up what looked like a standard security camera. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." At exactly 10 o'clock, as Teddy was giving a speech about community development and family values, the side of his house lit up with a projection that could be seen from 3 blocks away. It was a slideshow of text messages between Teddy and Brielle, complete with timestamps and explicit details. The crowd went silent as they read about secret hotel meetings, divorce plans, and mocking commentary about both betrayed spouses. Teddy stopped mid-sentence, his face going white as he realized what was happening. "Turn it off!" he shouted to his staff, but Nash had made sure the projector was locked and password protected. The final slide was a photo of Teddy and Brielle leaving the Meridian Hotel, taken by the same private investigator who'd contacted Nash. The timestamp showed it was taken yesterday, the same day Brielle had supposedly ended their relationship. Patricia Voss stood near the bar, watching her husband's humiliation with what looked like grim satisfaction. She raised her glass in a mock toast before walking out, followed by half the party. Teddy found me in the crowd, his face red with rage and embarrassment. "You snake," he hissed. "You'll pay for this." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone to show him a bank notification, "I think you're the one who's going to pay. Your wife's attorney just froze your joint accounts pending the divorce proceedings." I walked away, leaving Teddy standing alone in his ruined party, and drove home to wait for Brielle's inevitable phone call. It came at midnight. "What the hell did you do?" "I told the truth," I said. "Isn't that what you wanted?" The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Brielle and a text message that simply said, "We need to talk. Now." I made coffee, read the newspaper, and checked my email before calling her back. "Felix, you've lost your mind," she said without preamble. "What you did last night was cruel and illegal, and what exactly did I do that was illegal? You violated our privacy. You stole private communications. I shared communications that were sent from devices purchased with marital funds, discussing plans to defraud me in a divorce. That's not theft, Brielle. That's evidence." She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her breathing heavily. "Where did you get those photos?" "Patricia Voss's private investigator. Turns out she's been documenting Teddy's affairs for months. You're just the latest in a long line of exciting women." "That's not true." "It's completely true. Would you like to see the others?" Another silence. "Felix, we can still fix this. What happened last night doesn't have to ruin everything." "You're right," I said. It doesn't have to ruin everything. Just everything you built with my money while you were planning to betray me. What do you want? I want you to understand what it feels like to be humiliated. I want you to know what it's like to have people laugh at you behind your back. I want you to experience the same helplessness you were planning to put me through. And then what? After you've destroyed my life, then what? Then you'll understand why trust matters. I hung up and called Rita. How are the client transfers going? Completed as of this morning. Every one of Mrs. Rourde's clients has been notified that she's unavailable and has been referred to alternative vendors. Any responses? Several. Most are understanding, but a few are asking for refunds on deposits, which she can't provide because her accounts are frozen. Exactly. That afternoon, Mimi called. Brielle's best friend sounded nervous and excited, the way she always did when she had gossip to share. Felix, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but Brielle is staying at the Meridian Hotel. She can't afford anywhere else because her cards aren't working. Why are you telling me this? Because she's been calling everyone we know, asking for money, and blaming you for ruining her life. She's making herself look desperate and vindictive. And you don't like that? I don't like being lied to. She told me you were having an affair, that you were trying to steal her business, that you were mentally unstable, but then I saw what happened at Teddy's party, and I realized she's been lying about everything. This was an unexpected development. Mimi had been Brielle's loyal friend for over a decade. What changed your mind? She asked me to lie to Patricia Voss's attorney. She wanted me to say I'd seen you with other women, that you'd been abusive, that you'd threatened her. She wanted me to help her destroy you in court. And I realized I don't actually know who she is anymore. Maybe I never did. That evening, I met Nash at a bar downtown to plan our next move. Teddy's in full damage control mode, Nash reported. He's hired a crisis management firm and a divorce attorney. Patricia's asking for half of everything, plus alimony. What about Brielle? Living in a hotel room and calling in favors. But here's the interesting part. She's not trying to reconcile with you anymore. She's trying to figure out how to hurt you. What do you mean? She called your office today. Told your boss you were having a mental breakdown and might be embezzling funds to pay for private investigators. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. She what? Don't worry. Rita intercepted the call and handled it. Apparently, she told your boss that Mrs. Rourde was dealing with some personal issues and might not be thinking clearly. Rita said that? Rita's protective of you. She also mentioned that she'd be happy to provide documentation of all your recent financial activities if anyone had questions about your professional conduct. I made a mental note to give Rita a significant bonus. What's our next move? We escalate. Tomorrow is the Meridian Hotel's monthly charity brunch. Very exclusive, very social, exactly the kind of event where Brielle would normally be networking. She'll be there? She's staying there. She can't afford not to be there. And, Nash smiled, and Patricia Voss will also be there, along with several other wives who've recently discovered their husbands' infidelities. I thought it might be nice if they all had a chance to compare notes. The next morning, I dressed carefully and drove to the Meridian Hotel. The charity brunch was in the main ballroom, and I could see Brielle through the windows, working the room with desperate efficiency. She looked tired. Her dress was wrinkled, her makeup wasn't quite perfect, and there was something frantic in the way she moved from group to group. I took a table near the back and watched as Patricia Voss entered with 3 other women I recognized from various social events. They moved like a pack, confident and focused. Brielle saw them coming and tried to escape, but the ballroom only had 2 exits, and Nash was blocking one of them. Brielle, Patricia said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. How nice to see you. I've been wanting to thank you. Thank me? For helping me realize what kind of man I married. The private investigator's photos were very illuminating. The nearby conversations stopped as people turned to listen. Patricia, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. You've been sleeping with my husband for months, planning to help him hide assets in our divorce. laughing about how stupid his wife was for not noticing. Brielle's face went white. I never said anything about you. You said I was pathetically clueless and that Teddy deserved someone who understood his ambitions. One of Patricia's companions, a woman named Helen, whose husband had recently left her for his secretary, stepped forward. Is this the one who's been giving advice about divorce strategy? This is her, Patricia confirmed. Brielle Torin, expert on extramarital affairs and asset concealment. I think we should all sit down and have a conversation, Helen said, gesturing to a nearby table. I'd love to hear more about these strategies. Brielle looked around desperately, but there was nowhere to go. The entire ballroom was watching now, and phones were coming out to record the confrontation. I have to go, Brielle said, trying to push past the group. Actually, said a voice from behind her, I don't think you do. We all turned to see a man in an expensive suit approaching the table. He was tall, distinguished, and completely unfamiliar to me. James Morrison, he said, extending his hand to Patricia. I represent several of the ladies here in their divorce proceedings. He turned to Brielle with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Torin, I've been hoping to speak with you. My clients have some questions about communications you had with their husbands regarding asset concealment and spousal deception. Brielle stared at him in horror. I don't know what you're talking about. I have text messages that suggest otherwise. Would you prefer to discuss this here, or would you like to schedule a formal deposition? The ballroom had gone completely silent. Every eye was on Brielle as she realized she was trapped in a room full of women whose lives she'd helped destroy. I need to leave, she whispered. Of course, Patricia said graciously. But you should know. Your little performance is being live-streamed to my social media accounts. I thought my friends should see what a home wrecker looks like when she's cornered. Brielle fled, pushing through the crowd and running for the exit. The ballroom erupted in conversation as people pulled out their phones to check Patricia's social media feeds. I sat back and watched the aftermath, feeling a deep satisfaction as Brielle's carefully constructed social life crumbled in real time. Nash appeared at my table grinning. Phase 3 complete, he said. Ready for the finale? 3 days later, I was in my office when Rita buzzed me. Mr. Rourde, there's a Teddy Voss here to see you. He says it's urgent. I looked up from the financial reports I'd been reviewing. Send him in. Teddy walked into my office looking like he'd aged 10 years in a week. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Felix, we need to talk. Have a seat. He sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. This has to stop. What you did at my party, what happened at the hotel brunch, it's gone too far. Has it? Patricia's taking everything. The house, the business, the cars. Her attorney is claiming I tried to hide assets, and they're freezing everything until the investigation is complete. That's unfortunate. You know I never tried to hide anything. Those text messages were taken out of context. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the screenshots Nash had provided. We'll need to move the offshore accounts before Patricia's attorney finds them, I read aloud. Felix is too trusting to have proper asset protection. That seems pretty clear to me. Teddy's face flushed. Those were hypothetical discussions. Hypothetical discussions about defrauding your wife and stealing my money. I never stole anything from you. You stole my wife. You stole my trust. You stole 8 months of my life while you planned to destroy my marriage for your own entertainment. Teddy leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Look, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But Brielle came on to me. She pursued me. I was just what? Just an innocent victim of my seductive wife. She told me your marriage was over. She said you were already planning to divorce, that she just needed someone to help her through the transition. And you believed her? I wanted to believe her. I studied his face, noting the desperation, the fear, the complete absence of the arrogance he'd displayed just a week ago. "What do you want from me, Teddy?" "I want you to call off your dogs. Tell Patricia's attorney that I never actually planned to hide assets. Tell them the text messages were just fantasy, not real plans." "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'll tell everyone that you hired private investigators to stalk us. I'll claim you violated our privacy, that you're obsessed and dangerous." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Go ahead. Tell everyone that I hired investigators to document your affair with my wife. Tell them I gathered evidence of your plans to defraud both of our spouses. See how much sympathy you get." Teddy's face went red. "You snake. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won. I think I've proven that actions have consequences." He stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is. Patricia's attorney has all the evidence they need. Your reputation is destroyed. Your marriage is over. Your business partners are distancing themselves from you. What exactly are you going to do for an encore?" Teddy stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word. That afternoon, my phone rang. Brielle's name appeared on the screen. "Felix, I need to see you." "What for?" "I want to come home. I want to fix this." "There's nothing to fix, Brielle. We're getting divorced." "Please, just give me 5 minutes, let me explain." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at our condo that evening. She arrived at 7 o'clock, carrying a small suitcase, and looking more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup, and her clothes were casual, jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer outfits. "Thank you for seeing me," she said quietly. "You have 5 minutes. I know you hate me. I know you have every right to hate me. What I did was unforgivable." She sat down on the edge of our couch, not quite comfortable but not quite ready to leave. "But I need you to understand something. Teddy was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake that I regret every day." "Which part do you regret? The affair? Or getting caught?" "All of it. The lying, the betrayal, the way I treated you, the way I talked about you." She looked up at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "I know you'll never forgive me. I know our marriage is over, but I need you to know that I loved you. I do love you. I just lost sight of what that meant. You plan to take half of everything I've worked for and give it to your boyfriend." I was confused. I was scared. I thought I wanted something different, something exciting, but I was wrong. "You were wrong about what?" "About what I needed. About what would make me happy. About who you are." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know it's too late. I know you can't trust me anymore. But I need you to know that losing you is the worst thing that's ever happened to me." I looked at her sitting there, broken and desperate, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no sympathy. Just a cold, empty space where my feelings for her used to be. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said. "But feeling sorry doesn't undo what you did." "I know. I just hoped maybe we could find a way to what? To pretend the last 8 months didn't happen? To pretend I never saw those text messages? To pretend you didn't laugh at me with your boyfriend while you planned to destroy my life?" She was crying now, really crying, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. "I get it now," she said through her tears. "I can't live without you. I don't know how to be happy without you." Before I could respond, I heard a key in the front door. Brielle looked up in confusion as the door opened and Maris walked in, carrying a bag of groceries. "Oh," Maris said, seeing Brielle on the couch. "I didn't realize you had company." Brielle stared at her sister, then at me, then back at Maris. "What are you doing here?" "I'm staying here temporarily," Maris said calmly. "Felix offered me the guest room while my apartment is being renovated." "Staying here?" "Maris has been helping me work through some things," I said. "Professional counseling, mostly, but she's also been good company." Brielle's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, then something that looked like panic. How long has this been going on? About a week, Maris said, setting down the groceries and moving to stand beside my chair. Felix called me after you left. He needed someone to talk to. And you just moved in? I offered emotional support to someone who'd been betrayed by his wife, Maris said evenly. Someone who needed to understand that not everyone in your family is dishonest and manipulative. Brielle stood up abruptly. This is insane. Maris, he's using you to get back at me. Actually, Maris said, I'm helping him move on from you. There's a difference. Move on? You're my sister. And you're my sister who destroyed a good man's trust for no reason other than your own selfishness. Brielle looked back and forth between us, her face growing red with anger and humiliation. You planned this. Both of you. This whole thing was planned. The divorce was planned, I said. Everything else was just a natural consequence of your choices. I don't believe this. My own sister... Your own sister watched you lie and cheat and plan to hurt someone who'd never done anything but love you, Maris interrupted. Your own sister got tired of making excuses for your behavior. Brielle grabbed her purse and headed for the door. This isn't over, she said. Actually, I called after her, it is. The divorce papers were filed this morning. You'll be served tomorrow. She stopped with her hand on the doorknob. And Brielle? The settlement is exactly what you and Teddy planned for me. You get nothing except what you brought into the marriage, which, if I remember correctly, was about $12,000 in debt and a car that didn't run. She turned around one last time, her face a mask of rage and desperation. You'll regret this, both of you. The only thing I regret, I said, is not seeing who you really were 8 years ago. She slammed the door behind her, leaving Maris and me alone in the quiet condo. Think she'll try to fight the divorce? Maris asked. With what? She has no money, no attorney, and no credibility. Her own best friend testified that she asked her to lie in court. What about Teddy? Teddy's got his own problems. Patricia's attorney is very thorough. Maris smiled and moved toward the kitchen to put away the groceries. You know, she said, I never liked her for you anyway. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because you seemed happy, and because I thought maybe I was wrong about her. She paused. I wasn't wrong. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Brielle had tried to contest it, but her attorney, a public defender who'd been assigned to her case, had advised her to accept the settlement rather than face a trial that would expose even more of her deception. Teddy had lost everything in his divorce and had moved to another state to start over. His real estate empire had crumbled when his business partners learned about his financial irregularities, and Patricia had gotten the satisfaction of watching him leave town in a 10-year-old Honda. Maris and I had grown closer during the long months of legal proceedings. What had started as professional counseling had become friendship, and friendship had become something deeper. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found that phone? She asked one evening as we sat on the balcony of our condo, watching the sun set over the city. I think I would have found out eventually, I said. I'm good at spotting irregularities. And then what? Then I would have done exactly what I did. But it would have taken longer, and it would have hurt more. Do you regret any of it? I thought about the question seriously. Did I regret the public humiliation, the systematic destruction of Brielle's life, the cold calculation of my revenge? No, I said finally. I regret trusting her in the first place. I regret not seeing the signs earlier, but I don't regret making sure she understood the consequences of her choices. Even though it was cruel? It was justice. She planned to do the same thing to me, except I hadn't done anything to deserve it. Maris nodded thoughtfully. In therapy, we call that natural consequences. People need to understand that their actions affect other people. And sometimes, I said, they need to learn that lesson the hard way. A month later, Brielle showed up at our door one last time. She looked older, tired, and completely defeated. She'd lost weight, her hair was shorter and less styled, and she was wearing clothes I didn't recognize. "Felix?" she said when I opened the door. "I get it now. I can't live without you." Before I could respond, Maris stepped out from the kitchen, smiling calmly. "Then you'll have to learn," she said. Brielle stared at us for a long moment, understanding finally dawning on her face. She saw Maris's ring on her finger, saw the way we stood together, saw the life we'd built in the space she'd left empty. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know," I said. "But sorry doesn't change anything." She turned and walked away, and I closed the door on that chapter of my life forever. Maris and I were married 6 months later in a small ceremony with only our closest friends. Nash was my best man, Rita was Maris's maid of honor, and even Patricia Voss attended, having become an unlikely friend through our shared experience of betrayal and recovery. As I watched Maris walk down the aisle, I realized that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Brielle's betrayal had hurt, but it had also freed me to find something better, something real, something worth keeping.